Hello, everyone. We are at the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and jump in and get started today. Welcome to the Upswell, the final in our weekly series with the Upcycled Food Association. I'm Amanda Oenbring, CEO of UFA, and really excited to have you join this conversation today on 5 years to SDG 12.3. So let's dive on in. As a reminder, we have been having weekly conversations to celebrate our 5th anniversary as an organization. So today wraps up the series. We're so glad that you're joining us here or listening to the recording, and would welcome you to listen to the recordings of all our conversations we've had by visiting the landing page here, with special thanks to our UFA member and series sponsor, 7 Sundays. Just a few quick housekeeping notes. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, will be made available to attendees, UFA members, and on the landing page I mentioned. And we welcome you as we have the conversation today to submit your questions using the Q&A feature in Zoom. And we'll be weaving those into the conversation as well as holding some time at the end if there are additional questions. We will be sending this recording in a follow-up email, including speaker information and resources we're sharing today. So look forward to that. Pretty straightforward agenda today. Really excited to jump into our conversation. So let's get started. So to set the stage of what we're here to talk about today for a few short minutes. So what exactly is SDG 12.3? We're going to go through just some quick terminology so you have your bearings as we enter into a conversation with our 2 lovely panelists. So just to remind folks of the framing, so the Sustainable Development Goals span 17 areas that were brought together through a global convening organized by the UN, dating back to 2015, really looking at how can we as a global community be moving forward specific goals with setting targets to hopefully achieve by 2030. Within those targets, area 12 specifically was looking at responsible consumption and production. And within SDG 12, SDG 12.3 is the specific food loss and waste goal you see here on the screen. So the goal was to, by 2030, have per capita global food waste at the retail and consumer level, as well as reduce food losses along production and supply chains, including post-harvest loss. So that's the next piece of definition to be aware of and thinking about food loss and food waste. So one great example from one of our panelist colleagues, WWF, working in the UK, really looking at how can you think about where we are losing food along the entire supply chain. So really having the opportunity to look at food loss be something that is occurring particularly on farm and getting food from farm to the place of sale. Food waste, looking at how our loss is occurring from the point of sale through the point of consumer consumption. Specifically here in the US, we are very fortunate to have ReFed, a close partner of ours, consistently measuring where are our food supply and our food surpluses happening along the point of production to consumption. Really exciting that they just updated their numbers. So the 2023 measures of US have just been released, and we'll be sharing the link to their insights engine where you can click in and see, kind of drilling down into the information, where specifically there are opportunities to be first and foremost preventing, and if we're not able to prevent, what else can be done with that food. Where our work at UFA really comes into play is looking at where are the intervention points along the journey of food through the food supply chain, really looking at, byproducts, side streams, particularly in the manufacturing sector. And we'll be exploring a lot of these different areas through our conversation today. So here at Upcycled Food Association, we're really rooted in our commitment to growing the upcycled food economy. So upcycled food, for those that are new to this term, Our founding premise was agreeing upon this definition that upcycled foods really are committing to 3 pillars. So, using ingredients that otherwise would not have gone to human consumption, so making sure that food is going to its highest and best use, are produced and procured using verifiable supply chains, and have a positive impact on the environment. So, with all those terms in mind, we're going to step into our conversation with our panelists today and hear from their perspectives and expertise about food loss, food waste, and upcycling. So I'm really pleased to introduce our 2 panelists today. Joining us are Tara Dalton and Molly Laverty. I'm going to read a quick overview of their backgrounds and then let them speak more specifically to the work that they do and the perspective they bring today. So starting with Molly. Molly Laverty is the Director of Environmental, Social, and Governance, ESG at Del Monte Foods. During her 14 plus years in the sustainability field, she has worked closely with stakeholders across various agricultural sectors, including coffee and specialty crops. She is committed to strategically managing environmental sustainability goals and impact. Molly has extensive experience in environmental, social, and economic sustainability, as well as corporate governance. Molly earned her MBA with a concentration in sustainable enterprise from the University of North Carolina, Keenan Flagler Business School, and holds a BA in anthropology from Washington University. So Molly, I'll hand it over to you for sharing more about your work and your background, and then Tara will bring you up on stage.
Thanks, Amanda. Really excited to be here today and speak to the group. As you mentioned, I lead ESG at Del Monte Foods, which spans a variety of responsibilities, but specifically related to food waste and our carbon footprint. How are we managing our inputs and our outputs within our supply chain to better manage this overall sustainability of our business? So really excited to speak a little bit today on food waste and how we're tackling that.
Thank you, Molly. Well, I'm excited also to be joined today by Tara Dalton, Circular Supply Chain Manager for the Food Loss and Waste team at World Wildlife Fund. She also oversees the U.S. Food Waste Pact, a unique voluntary agreement engaging businesses across the supply chain in meaningful and collaborative action to reduce food waste. During her tenure, she has grown the business engagement in the pact and with WWF by steering pilot projects and multi-sector working groups that promote innovative solutions and accelerate progress towards food waste reduction targets. Welcome, Tara.
Thank you so much. Really excited to be here and have always wanted to join this community to speak more about our work and hear questions from the groups that come to these webinars. And yeah, just as Amanda said, the World Wildlife Fund has a specific focus on food loss and waste. Agriculture is the #1 contributor to biodiversity loss. And so that's really kind of our angle coming in at that from that standpoint. If we can reduce the amount of food waste, then we can reduce our impacts on the planet, on biodiversity, right? From the standpoint of not having to grow as much food. And so we do this in a variety of ways. WWF has one-on-one partnerships with corporate partners to work toward their strategic food loss and waste reduction goals. And then, as Amanda said, we also are a primary lead for the U.S. Food Waste Pact, along with ReFed, in which businesses across the supply chain can become signatories, and we help with measuring their food waste, pre-competitive collaboration, pilot projects, all towards helping these signatories and businesses accelerate their progress toward their food waste goals. And if it's okay, Amanda, I might just put a link to the U.S. Food Waste Pact in the chat, just so folks can.
Please do. Yeah. So. I'm really excited to have both the expertise of Molly and Tara with us today to really think about, as we approach 5 years left in this timeline towards this SDG goal, what are tools you can have in your tool belt that can really help you wherever you sit in your role, really lead in terms of food waste and specifically the solutions that we bring in upcycling, weaving through that. So to really kick off our conversation today, wanted to ask each of you, how do you approach food loss and food waste within the context of your work? And Tara, maybe we'll start with you and let me know if there's any slides you want me to pull up on screen.
Sure. Actually, yeah, if you wouldn't mind pulling up my slides, I think it might just help ground it. We um we really come at it from first, if folks are familiar with the EPA food waste scale, which I unfortunately don't have a slide of, but it promotes basically thinking first about how do we keep food waste in under human consumption. So we're really coming at it from how can we prevent food waste in the first place, right? And keep it so that humans are eating it. With the next, following being and donation, animal feed, compost, right? All before having to get it to send it to landfill. So I think you can go to next slide. You already kind of gave us the background of the issue here, but food waste is a really big systemic problem. And what we want to understand from this kind of graph is that while households are the largest contributor to food waste, here ReFed has actually found it to be 48.2% of all food waste along the supply chain happens in the home. There's so much upstream, right, that impacts that at-home food waste, and that is important to be focusing on itself as well, right? If we can get consumers to be consuming and looking to buy upcycled foods, for example, then we can reduce on-farm loss, for example. I think you can go to the next slide. So just kind of a bit more about how we're approaching this food waste problem, right? We really want to we think that there needs to be cohesive targets set. So we've all aligned kind of under this 2030 goal, 50%, 50% by 2030 goal. And signatories that are joining on, right, kind of align under that. And then we think that it's important as well to measure. So you don't know where you're making progress unless you've got a baseline, unless you're benchmarking year to year. So we really, with our partners at ReFed, done a lot of work to get those benchmarks, find where the food waste is occurring, and measure our progress year upon year. So that is another kind of key core tactic we've taken. And then act too, right? It's one thing to kind of say, oh, we're doing X, Y, Z, we've set these targets, right? But it's really important to really see on the ground action. And so we've been supporting companies with different pilot projects. You can find case studies from these different pilot projects on our website. But bringing together multiple stakeholders kind of across the supply chain to think about what are the key levers of action that we can take to really drive progress. That's been kind of our core model. I think we can probably save the rest of my slides for later.
Wonderful. Well, ask the same question to you, Molly, in your work encompassing ESG across a very sizable company. How does food
Yeah.
loss and waste come
Yeah,
into
when we think about food loss and waste in our sphere of influence, it's really happening at the manufacturing level. So we don't own and operate farms in the U.S., and our method of production is canning and preserving food. So on the consumer-facing side, I feel like we have a really positive story to tell on a way to preserve food and reduce food loss in the home. But within our supply chain, where food loss occurs is receiving raw product, and the transformation that it goes to get into a can that's healthy, healthy product for a consumer to eat. So when we look at food loss, we're really trying to understand how our operation can be more efficient, how we can reduce waste or spoilage. And we have a task force that's really cross-functional, looking at every waste stream within our company, whether it be a small cut of green bean that might not fit the size standard for our typical cut green beans. What can we do there to capture that stream? To also things like apricot or peach pits, what is happening to those, where that's not maybe a human consumable waste stream, but it is a waste stream that's of an organic product that's going to the landfill. So we really look at it in an all-encompassing way of what impact can we have in that manufacturing food waste space, where we can reduce our impact.
so many opportunities across such
Mhm.
a diverse amount of side streams, byproducts that always brings to light so much innovation across our network. And it's great to hear those stories. So would ask, is there an example of a project or product that really embodies how you approach this topic in your work? Maybe Tara, we'll go back to you first.
Yeah, sure. And I know you've mentioned, oh, bonus points if it can be upcycling related. So I might just kind of give the example of we worked with two different retailers. This was about 2 years back, New Seasons Market, PCC Community Markets, around upcycling food within their operations. And so New Seasons Market, and again, you can find the case studies to these on our website, but New Seasons Market took a look at their rotisserie chickens and then fresh strawberries. They chose these as kind of two products that they knew were high waste. And they looked at upcycling them to their hot bar or to their salad bar. And we were able to really document the savings of it and then also the return on investment. So the profit that was able to be made. And then from there, it was kind of like it helped them build the business case for upcycling other items without having to do a very, in-depth dive of how much waste there is and what the dollar benefit is of, because with those two products, they were able to already show, look, there's the potential here. This is worth our time and investment in doing that. So that's been great. And we've heard from them. We always try to then ask, okay, what's next? What's the scale up, right? So they scaled it to more products and more stores. And last we heard is that it's a pretty widespread um, strategy that they use across stores. And then with PCC Community Markets, it was an interesting partnership. They've been looking at turning they're really known for their old artisan like bread, right? The crusty fresh bread that they make every day. But there's waste to be had there because customers always, of course, want fresh. So they've been looking at turning their bread into breadcrumbs. And what's unique about that is that they've engaged a new partner called Fair Start, who is also a job training partnership. And so those who are receiving culinary skills there, they're the ones who are taking the fresh bread, turning it into breadcrumbs, and then PCC Community Markets gets it back for them to sell again in their deli or salad or hot bar as well. And so just kind of an interesting, I think, analysis there too, in which, engaging a retailer's looking to accomplish many things. There's also kind of like the social component there of like these people who are like re-entering the job force, right? Giving them a job and giving them a role to play in this upcycled food approach that they were taking. So that's what I think is so cool also about working on food waste is it can involve so many different actors and there's something in it for everyone, right? There's social, environmental, and the bottom. It's the triple bottom line, really.
And really those full system ways to engage, right? It's such a simple shift, but thinking, how that ripples through how team members are going about their day, how customers are interacting with that product. There's so many ways to really spark that all encompassing. We all have an action that we can take and all have a role to play within these solutions. So Molly, how about you?
Yeah, I think, in our experience, it really is upcycled focused. We have 2 lines of 5 total products that are certified upcycled by the UFA. 3 of them are green bean products. So I mentioned a short green bean cut. We have a standard specification for, Del Monte cut green beans need to be within a certain size. It's what the consumer expects when they open up the can. But green beans are an agricultural product, so they don't come in specific sizes. You kind of get what you get out of the field. So we were trying to figure out something to do with both the ends, so the green bean tapers, or a cut that maybe wasn't quite the full inch long that our standard specifies that it be. So we came up with 3 products. One is a dollar channel, so it's called Del Monte Classics. It's sold in dollar stores, and one is called Farmhouse Cut Green Beans. So that's sort of like an assortment with the ends and different sizes, and another's called Petite Cut. So that's like I want it to be a small cut. So with those 3 lines, we were able to capture all of that. It was previously a waste stream that was typically going to animal feed or to land spreading, but we were able to capture that and create new value streams for different kinds of consumers while still, preserving the classic Del Monte cut green beans could remain as they are. So that's the example in green beans and working, across collaboration with our plant, how are they going to figure out the logistics of how everything is moving to make sure that those can be captured in a food safe way and preserved. The other example that I think was really cool was our fruit wellness cups. They're packed in our facility in Mexico, and we get the pineapple that goes into these fruit cups from our sister company in Del Monte, Philippines. So they have a pineapple plantation in the Philippines where our pineapples come from, and those pineapples are shipped to our Mexico plant packed in pineapple juice. It's how they're preserved in the can. And so we were opening up those cans to get the pineapple out, but discarding the pineapple juice because we didn't need it. But our R&D team was able to look at that and say, well, this is a sweetener. This is like a sweetener that came from pineapple that we could add to these fruit cups in place of sugar or some other sweetener. So we started, instead of dumping that, which would have been a form of BOD waste, kind of goes with the sewer system, we're able to just preserve that in tanks and then add it back into the cups as they were packing them. So really interesting example of how, upcycling is not just a sustainability initiative at Del Monte, but is really an operational initiative, R&D initiative. The creativity of our R&D scientists never ceases to amaze me of, what they're able to come up with for our products. So I love those two examples, one because they're our UFA certified products, but also just shows the cross-functional nature of how sustainability and food loss can really be integrated into an organization in a way that's really comprehensive.
What elegant but beautiful solutions. And I think it's so timely as we're going into the Thanksgiving holiday here in the US, right? That is the power of Upcycled Certified, giving consumers the chance to see that mark out on store shelves and be making that purchase of that product that has come through a beautiful, different approach and is capturing that value. And I also love that substitute of being able to take that natural sweetener in place of that sugar added ingredient. So that is such a great innovation to capture and be sharing. So thank you. Well, as we think about, folks on the line that might be reflecting on how they can be bringing this focus to their own work, whether they're already along their food waste upcycle journey or are new to this conversation, would love to hear from both of you. What have some of the most important or impactful factors in driving these commitments and progress in this work been for you? And you think about how it comes to life, both internally and externally. Molly, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think, on a personal level, when I think about food waste in the supply chain, I think, when we think about making sure people have enough to eat, but also with the nature of my work, what are the greenhouse gas implications of food waste ending up in a landfill, which we know has huge, methane emissions, but also all of the work that went into growing an input, right? Like a farmer spent time growing this food product. So for that to go all the way through the supply chain and then end up uneaten just seems like an enormous waste of resources and time and passion and just like everything that goes into the whole supply chain. So I really try to think, when I think of food loss, to really consider, like, in greenhouse gas accounting, they call it the cradle to grave, but like the cradle to grave impacts of what happens when you're not using an input as it was intended. So there's environmental implications, there's social implications, there's economic implications of food waste in our supply chain. So when I'm thinking about food waste in the context of my work, I try to stay really mindful of all of those implications in the supply chain. And it's allowed me to, have a little bit more of an open mind when we're trying to come up with solutions, both with our grower partners as well as our retailer partners, and we're the manufacturer in the middle. How can we really have an impact, all the way through?
And the power of that dot connecting, right? Being able to take that beautiful product that has had so much invested, transform it, and then really get it to those who are taking it out to the world. So many opportunities. Tara, what does that bring up for you in terms of your work?
Yeah, I really like how you put that, Molly. I would agree. I think we try to do a lot of work to translate food waste, that's occurring in percentage or pounds to what does that mean in terms of meals? Like, what does that mean in terms of, for some, it's also carbon emissions. For some, it's water. What is like land use? Like, what are those things that make it really tangible and that folks understand what the implication is of that food waste, and who's losing out, right, on in terms of that. And we really try to do a good job of messaging that for different audiences, and every, like, from the top down or bottom up within a company, right? The corporate leaders might care more about one thing and want to know about those kind of big picture, global perspective, dollars, et cetera. But then how do we get those corporate targets and that, that understanding then to the frontline workers, right? To the people serving the food, or in the manufacturing setting, the people running the lines. How do we get them really on board? Because they're the ones who have their hands in it, right? And are going to be able to see where the waste is occurring and help keep it from happening. We have a lot of examples of work with different manufacturers in which we ran employee engagement campaigns. So really developing training materials that, explained food waste to the frontline worker, why they should care, and then beyond training, engaging them, asking them to tell us from their knowledge of working, and seeing it every day. Where are you seeing the waste occur? What are your ideas? And we just have some really great examples of, an employee will have an idea and then we try implementing it. We did this at Bob's Red Mill. We took one employee idea, working with them, and it was around like some extra flour spilling over on this one line. Well, after we implemented that employee idea, it reduced the waste on that particular line 70%. And so it was just a really quick win. All it involved was like screwing in some screws that were going loose on this one sifting machine a couple times a day. And again, 70% waste reduction due to that. And then that just kind of gets the attention then, right, of the corporate leaders who are saying, oh my gosh, if we can kind of connect the dots with our employees more, there's a lot more wins out there, I'm sure, that we could garner here from having clearer alignment across the company towards these food waste goals.
There's so much opportunity in making the tangible more connected to the intangible, and then rooting that intangible and what are those tangible realities, and having curiosity around what do we not know, right? And inviting all stakeholders to share their wisdom from wherever they are in that process. I'll never forget the story. I believe it was John from Albertsons told at the Refed Food Waste Summit earlier this year, of going into an ice cream processing facility and looking at where the employees were having a chance to recognize where food waste was occurring. And one of the things was they would purge the line when they were switching flavors, going from a chocolate to a vanilla. And one of the employees came to him with the idea, said, let's make a blended swirled flavor. And not only did they cut down on the food waste, that became one of the most popular flavors coming out of that moment. So just those little aha moments that might come from a conversation with anyone along the way. A lot of beauty in that wisdom. So thinking about, as you balance long-term sustainability goals, we're talking about, these have been really long horizon timeframes we're talking about. So there's the balance of what can we be doing in 5 years from now, and what can we be doing today or tomorrow? How do you help coach those you're working with balance the need for those long-term progress on goals with also showing short-term wins? And Tara, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, well, that example I just gave, of Bob's Red Mill seeing the short-term win, that those short-term wins are so key because they drive enthusiasm and motivation towards the longer-term goal and towards bigger investments. So just to follow up, kind of after Bob's Red Mill saw like, oh wow, there's so much to be gained from diving into this work further, it then led them to create a scrap team, is what they called it. And basically, it was an interdisciplinary team across their company focused on reducing waste. So those quick wins lead to the bigger long-term investments, like seeing that, right? And you need the quick wins too. If 2030 is coming up on us all fast here, but at first it seemed way far away, right? So it's important to have those kind of year-to-year goals. And that's why we put so much emphasis in the pact on measurement, on year-to-year measurement, so that we can be holding ourselves to a standard saying, where are we seeing the waste? What are the benefits? occurring. And actually, Amanda, if you wouldn't mind just bringing up my slide again, I just want to show that we are indeed seeing progress. People always need some good news, right? So if you don't mind going to slide 16, um, we the one, yeah, that one there. So what we have found from that measurement year upon year that we've been doing in the pact is that since 2019, when we began, US food waste pact retailers have seen a 28% decrease in unsold food rates. And you can see over kind of in the table to the side here, the impact that means in terms of carbon, water, sales, meals. So again, yeah, just it's important to kind of, bite off like different pieces towards your ultimate goal and then measure along the way. But so many people, so many companies are just not measuring at all, right? And so that's just a tough place to start from, is how can you prove the return on investment if you're not getting any baselining?
No, that's so important. And then, the old adage, you manage what you measure and measure what you manage, right? And how that really plays into that. Molly, anything you'd like to add on this topic?
I mean, I'd really just love to agree with Tara there. I think within our experience as well, within our supply chain, having overarching goals is great, but they can seem really overwhelming if you don't start chipping away at them. And we've seen similar examples of employee projects or employee generated ideas that have been those quick wins and do serve as a spark to get the attention of leadership to understand, this not only is this a great idea, but it's saving us money, it's saving us time, it could be safer. So there's all sorts of employee generated ideas around food waste and food loss, energy waste and energy loss in our plants that have been some of our biggest success stories. So I really like to lean into that. As an ESG professional, I'm not in the plant every day. I definitely will not have the best ideas about what is and isn't possible. So we really rely on employee generated ideas and enthusiasm around ideas to minimize food waste, and that's where we've seen our biggest successes as well.
Love that. I want to pepper in a question here from Jan for you, Tara. So, how much communication is there with your own vertical stakeholders about further optimization of lost and waste reduction? Are you involving them to address the biggest possible picture? Are you opening up for outside of the box ideas?
Yes, and I'm going to make an assumption about vertical partners, what that means maybe more, but if I get it wrong, feel free to clarify further. But so we're really aiming to kind of, as we move forward, take this whole chain approach to food loss and waste. So and what we mean by that is getting partners to think outside of their own like four walls operationally, right? So how can we influence food waste upstream and downstream? And actually, I have another slide that might support this, Amanda. This is on our whole chain work. Slide 17, I think it was just the one right after that. But the reason why we see this as being so successful is that for different products and different commodities, the waste occurs at different points of the supply chain, the greatest amount of waste. And so, for example, we've done a pilot project on potatoes that engaged our business signatories all the way from farm to retail, to manufacturing, to retail. And we found that the greatest amount of waste for them was occurring, for that product was occurring at the processing facility. So Lamb Weston was our frozen potato supplier for that. And we just did a follow-up with them to dive deeper into their processing facility and say, okay, this is where most of the waste is occurring, but why and where? So we just are about to publish a part 2 to that project. Strawberries was a totally different story, right? The waste occurred upstream on the farm and was largely due to fruit being left in the field because they were edible, but just not marketable. They just didn't look right, or they were too small. So the solutions that you're going to implement to solving strawberry waste, right, is quite different. And so we're engaging retailers and food service into thinking about, oh, could they accept those less than perfect strawberries, find a use for them, bake them into things, use them in smoothies or drinks, right? So just it's important to know like where the waste is occurring, and then make the partners all along the supply chain aware of that waste, you know, and drive them forward thinking about, oh, this could be a new product line for you. There's that interest. It's also getting at a lot of folks' ESG scope 3 emission goals to think about waste upstream as well. So converting it into the carbon and that's going to be saved is really key. Oh, and I see someone in the chat is excited about plums. Yeah, that pilot project is about halfway through, so we don't have the results or case study to share yet. But I just a teaser is that wow, yeah, stone fruits. There's a lot of waste in stone fruits like plums and peaches. So it's really illuminating to do these kind of whole chain studies and really quantify it.
Well, such a great story to really bring that question to life. And thank you, Jan, for bringing that into the conversation and your upcycling work with plums happening in real time as a UFA member. So check out Sierra Agra and the great work they're doing in the Central Valley. So
Cool. Okay.
I want to bring in the question, when we think about setting goals short term to long term, what are some of the biggest hurdles you encounter along the way, especially if it does come to how upcycling shows in your work? How do you navigate challenges such as supply chain limitations, consumer acceptance, or stakeholder concerns? So wide variety of ways to approach that. Tara, should we start with you?
Just involving a variety of stakeholders. And so,
yeah, can we think about what are the hurdles to approaching any of these big goals that you typically might encounter or your stakeholders might be encountering in the work that you're coaching them through?
Yeah, well, I think we really try to avoid people, working in their own silos. And so there's a lot, I think we're getting better though through like the pact and bringing businesses together to talk to one another pre-competitively. We're able to start this kind of like new culture of sharing, right? That I think is really unique and different, and that like fears about antitrust or even just sharing trade secrets like has prevented in the past, right? And so it's just really awesome when we're on, some of our working group calls to hear businesses like say, oh, I want to like follow up with you outside of that to learn more about how you ran that employee engagement campaign, or to learn about how you managed to talk to your suppliers about doing XYZ. So I think it's yeah, just with this multi-stakeholder engagement, it's a work in progress. There's like culture and legality and so much, that's kind of against it, but I think that's just all part of the work and part of the shift that we're trying to make, right? So
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think one of the main drivers of us joining UFA was to be able to connect with other companies. I think within our supply chain, the limitations that we see are around manufacturing capability as well as food safety concerns. How can if we harvest, and if something doesn't get into a can and preserved, like there are real food safety concerns if we can't, dehydrate, preserve, chill, some sort of step to make sure that food remains safe to eat. So we were really interested in partnering with other like-minded companies who may just have a capability that we don't, or may have the space that we don't, or a technology that we don't, but really wanting to partner together on a shared solution.
Well, that is really the beauty of membership at UFA. We have members all along the supply chain, and so much of that moving forward. What is the stabilization, right? The dehydration, capturing that value to be able to make sure these streams are ending up to their highest and best use. So, invite you to explore the member directory for all sorts of folks working on all sorts of interventions, as Molly mentioned. Want to bring in a question here from Kim. How should we engage our company if they're not measuring waste?
I can speak to from a Del Monte perspective. We have seen a lot of traction when you can tie it to cost savings. Waste is not free, so disposing of things is expensive. So that has always been a really great inroad, if you could tie to a cost savings project. And I will say, from a communications perspective, anytime we communicate publicly around our work around reducing food loss and food waste, we just receive so much attention. I think it's something that consumers are really passionate about, just the industry in general. So I would say those two tactics have been helpful for us from a communication standpoint as well as a cost savings perspective.
Yeah, would definitely agree with that for like building the business case behind like why measure your waste, right? I think too, like just realizing that there's going to be more, there's like, so California is one state that's like really leading the way in like an organics, like landfill ban, right? And donation like requirements. And there's more states that are starting to adopt this as well. And we are working towards national and like federal um law as well to try to promote some of these things. So just making your company like realize this is coming. And so being able to try to reduce your waste now like ahead of time is going to help you get ahead of the curve of some of these organics, waste bans in the future. And also just kind of for helping build that business case. If you haven't been to the Refed Insights engine, yet that's just a great place to kind of play around with and explore. And they convert like waste poundage into things like what Molly was talking about, dollars lost, carbon, water, etc. So I love dropping things in the chat, so I might just do that again.
Yeah, it'd be great to share that link, and we'll make sure we get that link out
Yeah.
in the recording resources too to come. Really want to highlight their solutions module within that of being able to look at, okay, of all the tools in your tool belt and approaching food waste, what are the ones that might have the most impact if you're really concerned about water or really looking at the labor elements. And
Mhm.
upcycling is one of their top 12 solutions in terms of what it can be accomplishing in helping us reach these larger goals. So definitely
Mhm.
that is part of the support we provide at UFA, helping give you the insights, the data, the measurements to be able to make that case, whether it's internally with your company or looking at the measures. Like our UFA member Matson did a study and found 95% of people agree that food waste is a problem, right? So that is something we can all get behind. That's really important. So Tara and Molly want to bring us into more of that future lens. So we've been talking a lot about, what has been happening both past and real time as we think about emerging practices or approaches that you see as the next big disruptors in 5 years or beyond ahead. How are you preparing for or contributing to these changes? And Molly, we'll start with you.
I think, for us, really looking towards more of the work like Kara was talking about, whole supply chain, right? Just because we don't own and operate farms doesn't mean we don't partner with farms. Just because we don't own and operate retail does not mean we don't partner with retailers. So really trying to find solutions and working both with our growers and our customers who are retailers on how we can partner together to reduce food waste. I think that will be, I don't know if it's necessarily a disruptor, but I do think that will be the way forward. These aren't issues that any one company or any one organization can attack and address on their own. So I do feel like the multi-stakeholder approach is going to be really critical as we start to examine food systems and what we can do together to really eliminate food waste and food loss.
Yeah, agreed. And I'd say that I'd add to that whole chain perspective Molly was mentioning being important, that there's really a forward-looking focus on consumer waste. As I mentioned, what is it? I've heard 40% to 48% of the food waste occurring in the US. And so we really cannot ignore that. And we really need to call businesses to action to impact that, right? And building the business case for that can be hard sometimes, right? Because if consumers consume more food, you'd automatically think, well, then businesses are winning out, right? They're buying more food. But it is more complicated than that. And we do need to kind of pull that apart about what that means to have a retailer or a manufacturer engaged in reducing household food waste and what the benefit of that, both for people, the planet, the bottom line, right? So I think we have, like, just as a nation, a lot of work to be done around that culturally, in the private and public sector. And there's work being done. So like in California, legislation was just passed to update date labeling. And we know that confusion around date labels is a really big cause of household food waste. And so I think that's a great new step. We've been advocating again for federal legislation around that. But that's just like, one thing that upstream partners can do to impact household food waste. And there's a lot of other kind of levers like that we need to be thinking about, and that I do take hope. I do see companies thinking really thoughtfully about.
I often describe it as rebuilding our muscle memory, right? These things that we are looking to return to are old and, practices of, instead of looking at that date label, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look with your eyes, smell, taste, see the true quality of that product you might have at home before, just reading that date and tossing it away in that moment. So rebuilding that knowledge as a culture and as a consumer base is really important and possible. And that's part of the work that we get really excited to celebrate every June with Upcycled Food Month too, really helping our members, speak to that consumer base about how their product or their ingredients or their story helps make that action possible at the consumer level. So, and ask both of you, what advice do you have for companies really looking to stay at the forefront of whether it be sustainability in general or more particularly in addressing food loss and food waste within their own operations or their own landscape? And especially if you have any resources to share, we would welcome that.
I have seen just the sustainability profession change pretty dramatically over the past 5 years or so, with a real focus on data and reporting and standardization. Anybody doing business in Europe right now is subject to their new reporting and disclosure laws. So I do think it's easy to get wrapped up in all of the mandates and data and reporting, kind of with a narrow focus. So my advice is to make sure you don't forget to take a step back and like look holistically at what your company is doing, not just, the number that you collected about what your company is doing, but what real actions can have an effect. I think as businesses are moving forward in their sustainability journeys, especially with the number of businesses who have set carbon reduction targets, there's going to have to be a lot of supply chain engagement to work with your suppliers to understand, what practices are having an effect. So my two pieces of advice are like, don't get so caught up in the regulation and the data and reporting that you forget the reason why we're doing this all in the first place. And really start engaging with our supply chains. I think it can feel daunting. I know I feel overwhelmed sometimes thinking about, the enormity of our supply chain, but really picking those partners to dive in with, start understanding, how you can work together in a cross-functional way to really create real change.
Yeah, that dance between the qualitative and the quantitative and helping them dance together to move forward. And Tara, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with that, Molly. Like I said before, sometimes it's like picking the quick win and then really sharing it, like doing a good job about sharing your wins, right? And your successes, because I feel like so often we talk with companies who are like, oh, yeah, and we've been doing this like kind of cool side project. And we say, oh my gosh, well, can we write a case study on that? Can we publish it? Like the world should know, like we want to promote that, right? Of course, there's always room to grow and improve, but it's important that we show each other how we're moving the needle and that businesses share with their consumers and, to build also that kind of consumer awareness and demand. And then, yeah, I would just say too, just like constantly thinking about food waste, and that, I'm probably preaching to the choir, but just food waste is there's something in it for everyone, right? We will sometimes have companies tell us, oh, we can't focus on food waste right now because we're really focused on carbon. Well, food waste has been like identified as one of the top, you know, like things that we should be focused on if we're concerned about climate change. The Project Drawdown listed it as number one, or water or whatever, right? Or food insecurity, right? So it's a multi-stakeholder, bipartisan like issue that we can really all get behind. It's kind of unique, I'd say, in some ways, in terms of an issue topic.
Yeah, I think there's the global element and a unifying element, right? We're all helping contribute to this problem. We can all help contribute to solving this on the road
Mhm.
ahead. So,
Mhm.
well, as we approach the end of our time, I want to invite the audience to drop any remaining questions you might be thinking of in the Q&A feature, and just turn it over to Tara and Molly to share some final thoughts. When you think 5 years from now, if we're having another conversation, looking back on the 5 years we have ahead from today, what do you hope we'll be able to say at that 5-year mark in 2030?
Mm.
Tara, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, I shared that among the businesses with whom we've been measuring under the pact, we're at 28%, reduction in surplus food rates right now. So I think we can get there. I think we can get to our 50% by 2030 goal. Um, but, in addition to the numbers, I think it would just be great to really point to, wow, there's been a really big cultural shift here in terms of how businesses are approaching this and our acceptance of food waste as a country. I feel like there's just acceptance of it right now, and it's become normalized, right? And so getting to a place where in our households or in our business operations, we just don't accept it anymore. And it's not seen as um, culturally, yeah, acceptable or responsible.
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments. I would love to see many more multi-stakeholder projects, that the issue of food waste isn't being tackled by individual companies sharing a case study, but we're sharing more of these, transformational operational projects that are really transforming the system in our country.
Well, I'm thinking for folks on the line, as well as folks that'll be watching this recording over the next 5 years, what is one tangible action you would suggest that our audience can take today or soon to make a meaningful difference?
Mm.
Tara, you want to?
Oh no, I'm off mute, so I have to go first. Yes, I mean, there's so much, right? And obviously there's the composting piece of it. If we're talking about just you as an individual in your own home, there's thinking about eating everything you purchase, right? There's looking to buy imperfect foods as well. Um, Finding those kind of alternative channels, right? But then also just thinking about yourselves as voting citizens, making this really, really an issue of policy as well, and promoting that, locally and statewide, nationally. Yeah, it's a big issue, and we need to bring the policy side of it into play.
Yeah, I would echo all of that, and adding to education, talking about it a lot. I think there's still some consumer misconceptions around upcycling and what that can be. So the more we can talk about it and show examples of, innovative ways, your supply chain in your home, like get creative about what you cook with and how you use, things that are in your house already. And yeah, just education, education, education.
Such great, tangible, practical things we can keep doing, start doing. So, really want to thank Molly and Tara for sharing your perspectives today. I know I gained a lot of insights and a lot of inspirations, and I'm really excited for this conversation to continue and be creating ripples ahead in all the work that we're doing. So, That's really what we are here to do at the Upcycled Food Association as a membership-based trade association, and would welcome you to consider your place in our community. We've got a wide range of memberships, from student and individual memberships if you're just someone passionate about what you can be doing to support the upcycled economy and stopping food waste in your own life, to company memberships. Whether you have an upcycled product yet or not, we want to help you on that journey and connecting with the resources and the inspirations that you've heard today. So invite you to learn more as you reflect back on anything that our series has covered. Just want to pop up again if you join the line midway. This is the last in our 5 conversations we've been having weekly, and all the recordings to these conversations, as well as this conversation, will be available on our website. So I invite you to return to these sources, engage and interact with all our speakers and our panelists to continue these conversations ahead. So as we wrap up today, a big thank you to everyone that has been involved and participating to make this series possible over the course of these last 5 weeks. As we reflect on the 5 years to date for the Upcycled Food Association, I'm only filled with so much excitement and positivity and possibility for what is ahead in the next 5 years, both for our organization and the larger work that we have to all do ahead. So special thanks to Molly, to Tara for joining us today, sharing your perspective, and look forward to keeping in touch. Stay well, all.
Thank you.